Last time.
Okay, so people should be able to get in online. And after I get a few of them in, I'll mute them so they don't annoy each other. All right, so we are here. It's time for chapter 5, I think. Let me take a look. It's February 24. Yeah, chapter 5. All right. That should be the last thing up. Yeah. All right. And let's see how many I've got in the Zoom. Okay, I'm going to mute these ones. And if other people join and irritate you, you can try sending a chat message or something. I'll probably notice I'm at least close to it this time. Sometimes I see that people have been complaining for an hour and I haven't seen them online. That's why this online system is far from perfect. But it might beat driving to school. Anyway, so here's a few tips. KonBoot is a project I took out of the list of projects because it's no longer free, but this is pretty cool. It was originally a floppy disk. There's probably other versions now. You boot a Windows system, you boot from the floppy. It changes the contents of the Windows bootloader in memory so that now you can choose any username off the list and it will take any password and just accept the password by simple patching. This is pretty awesome because it means not only can you get in anybody's account, you can get in all their files, and whatever you do goes in a log as if they did it. So this is pretty interesting, and it is important to realize that if you do not have full disk encryption turned on, like BitLocker, Windows passwords are just ornaments. They are like TSA locks on your luggage. They are there to stop people from accidentally getting in your account. They are not keeping anybody that knows any hacking from getting right into your account. And for a lot of projects, you sail right past Windows passwords. And Apple passwords, if you don't encrypt the hard disk, are just the same. All you have to do is reboot the machine, hold down, I think, Command S, go into single user mode, change anybody's password, go into anybody's account. That's why they have hard disk encryption. If you don't use hard disk encryption, your computer is pretty much wide open. And this means if you go to court with the evidence of who did things based on who's logged in, there's a limitation to the accuracy of that evidence. It is pretty easy to get in someone else's account. It is difficult, by the way, on a modern system like the Mac or Linux to steal your password. And this attack does not steal your password. You get into someone's account temporarily, but you don't get their password. Windows, it's still very easy to steal your password because their password hashing system is 30 years out of date. But other people use proper password hashing, and it's really quite difficult to extract the password. So the Ultimate Boot CD is the easiest way to do this. I found on a modern machine. There are a couple of versions. There's a Windows version and a Linux version in the projects. This is how tech support repair people do it. One of the more common tech support issues is I lost my password, I'm locked out of my machine, and you just boot to one of these things, and they pretty much all use the same tool. CNIT Pass is a Linux tool that can just change the contents of the Windows NT database to change a password as necessary. If they have encrypted their personal folders with Windows file encryption, which is not that common anymore, then you will lose them because those are based on the old password. And if you change the password, you can log in as that person, but you cannot open their encrypted files anymore without having the old password. That's why encryption is expensive. If you use encryption on drive or on files at a company, the main effect of it is your own workers get locked out of their own files because they lose the key or the password. So you have to consider emergency recovery technique or you will be sorry. It also has some benefit, of course, locking out bad guys, but the first thing it does is lock out your own workers and create a denial of service. So there's the Linux-based UBCD that looks different but does about the same thing. And you can promote users, normal users to administrators, and so on. This works fine on everything. I've tried it on Windows 10, Windows 8, Server 2012. I'm pretty sure it still works on Server 2016. Microsoft has never updated their local password storage since Windows NT in 1993, which is why it uses MD4 because it's so old, they wrote it before MD5 even existed. And they never updated it for some unknown reason. Yeah.
Is there anything you can use to hack the Mac that way, or are they more resistant?
They are much less resistant. You don't need a disk for anything. Like I say, all I have to do is reboot it, hold down a couple of keys, and it boots into single user mode so that you're logged. There's also other ones. There's recovery mode too. There's several ways to just reboot a Mac so you get a command line as administrator. You can just change passwords, create new accounts, do anything you want.
So that's like considered as well. This is why you have to default physical access to the machine.
Right. Physical access means you can do it. This is the way Windows XP was. Windows XP by default, there was an administrator account with no password, Windows XP Home. So you could just get in. Macs are that way unless you turn on full disk encryption. And if you do, and if you really want to lock people out, you encrypt the whole drive with BitLocker or with the Macs file vault. And after you do that, they really can't get in without the password. Then you're pretty much hosed. Then there's a few extremely exotic attacks that are expensive and rare. There's the cold boot method where you catch the machine suspended but not turned off, and then you take it apart and pull out the chip and freeze it and move the chip to another machine so you can read the key out of the chip before it fades. And then the other one is the one done by a guy at Noisebridge in San Francisco. You dissolve the trusted platform module chip with acid and reach in with a microscopic needle and read the voltage off the microscopic pins until you actually find the pin that has the key. And he actually succeeded at that after destroying 100 TPM's try. So this is, you know, like a moonshot. I mean, how much do you really want to get in there? But if it's, you know, if it's that important to get in there, it can be done. But it's, you know, that's what security is. There's no such thing as making it impossible to get your data. You just make it difficult enough that you don't have to worry too much. Anyway, all right, so port scanning is a huge step forward. Yeah. What's that? I got a message. Oh, thank you for telling me. Good, let's see. You can see him and I can't for some reason. That's good. All right. Oh, just laughing. Okay, that's fine. All right. Well, you laugh. Laughter is okay. All right. Yeah, I know that process of dissolving the chip with acid, that does sound a little extreme. Anyway, so all right, so one step in moving forward, and the big step is port scanning. Once you've found the machine you want to attack and you've finished looking at other things like footprinting the website and stuff to decide what's interesting, you eventually decide, I want to get in this box right here. So the first thing you do is scan the ports to see what ports are open. That tells you what processes are listening on the network on that box, and that's your obvious way in. There might be other ways in, but usually the way in is to find that it's running something like FTP or a web service or email, and then send some kind of malformed data into one of those ports that will cause it to crash and give you control of the machine. So that's the point of this. You want to find services, you would like to find what ports are open, and you would like to find what software is running, and if possible, what version of software is running, and then you can look and see if that version has a known vulnerability, and then it's easy to get in. Oh, all right. There are a lot of scanners out there. There's an Angry IP scanner. It's built in Corley by default. Looks kind of pretty, even gives you sort of a GUI. The thing that's angry about it is it goes pretty fast. Linux tools are often quite fast. Windows tools are almost never fast anymore. Ever since Windows XP, Microsoft does not let you have direct kernel access, direct network access. So you cannot send a packet out the network card. All you can do is ask the operating system to please send the packet, and it then has timing parameters that you can't adjust. So you can't make it go really fast, but you can on Linux. So NetDiscover is very handy. This will scan a network quite quickly, and I've used it quite a lot as we move into the next class in OSCP certification. It scans a network quite quickly and gives you a list here because it does ARP scanning. ARP scanning is the best way to find things on a network because every machine has to respond to ARP replies. Even if you have a firewall and you turn it all the way up and block every port, you have to answer ARP replies or you can't use the network card at all. So you might as well pull out the cable because ARP is used to find your IP address, to find your MAC address from your IP address, and nobody can send you anything. Not even the web page you're browsing can't send you the web page you want to look at unless you answer ARPs. So your firewall will not block them. So just trying ARPs through the local area network is the fastest scan. The problem with it is it's a layer 2 scan, so you cannot, it doesn't go through the router. So you can't scan somebody else's network with an ARP scan. You have to be physically on their local network to do it. So it's fast and much more accurate, but it only tells you the local network. That's true in general. There are a lot of layer 2 attacks. I've got quite a few projects on them, and I used to do it quite a bit at DEF CON and such. And people argue about this. And Dan Kaminsky had the standard famous security luminary. He said, you can't secure layer 2. That is the general belief. The general belief of most designers of hardware and software is there's no real point trying to stop all these layer 2 attacks that are very powerful. The only thing you can do is lock the door and keep people from physically getting on your layer 2 network. because once they get on there, there's just a whole bunch of nasty things they can do, and it's very difficult to make any software or hardware that can withstand them. Nmap is your main tool for scanning, a free open source tool, and you've been using it. It has a nice GUI these days, runs on every operating system. It's the cat's meow. So when you're scanning a port, you want to find out if that port is open, closed, or filtered. Those are the three states of a port. And it would be nice if it would then give you some guess about what OS is running and perhaps what versions of services are running. Some people have tried to say port scanning is illegal. No one, as far as I know, has ever been prosecuted for port scanning. Fyodor, who wrote Nmap, has scanned the entire internet. Back maybe 5-6 years ago when this was still controversial, he scanned the entire internet to determine what the most common ports were to build them in Nmap as the default scan. And then now it is so common to scan the entire internet that many people do it openly in partnership with the Department of Homeland Security and otherwise. Kirk, one of the students here that does a lot of goofy projects, he set up a proxy, a common proxy server running on a common proxy port in the lab on an open public IP, and within 5 minutes, somebody in China found it and started surfing porn through it. So they are scanning the whole internet. Many people are scanning the whole internet constantly to look for useful things. And that's why at one point he found what he thought was an open SMTP relay on port 25. And I said, I don't think so, because if you have one of those, people find it fast and they send a bunch of spam through it and you get all the complaints. So that's like a house on fire. You don't have that and not notice. Other things you can do, and all he had to do is take his open proxy and move it to a non-standard port, and it sat there for a month and nobody found it. So people, you can't scan every port on the whole internet in any reasonable amount of time, but you can scan one port on the whole internet in just a few hours with a fast, and that's worth people's bother that a lot of people are doing that. So anyway, and so if you want to scan anybody's ports, as far as anybody can tell, it's not something you can be prosecuted for unless you do it really fast or send malformed packets and crash a server, and that could be considered a denial of service attack, and that could be something you can get prosecuted for if you do more than $1,000 or $5,000 worth of damage. So all scanning, almost all scanning does TCP ports. TCP are by far the most useful thing to scan because of the TCP handshake. We've talked about this. TCP is like a normal phone call. You ring the phone, they pick it up, you say hello, they say hello, and you don't send your message until all that has happened because you don't want to waste your time talking when the other person is not listening. So to make sure, so before you send any data to TCP, you do a handshake. You send a SYN. If it's listening and willing to talk to you, it sends a SYN ACK, then you send an ACK, and the data comes later. So because there is this introductory handshake process, you can do a scan just to see what's open. So you send a SYN. And if you get a SYN ACK back, that means the port is open, and you can just send a reset and say, I don't want to bother any further. I've got all I want. This is what's generally called the stealth scan. It's the default scan at Nmap because this gives you the information with the minimum amount of traffic, and it is the sneakiest because you probably will not even appear in the log. Because you did not get to even complete the handshake, you did not get to send any data to the server or receive any data, you couldn't have stolen anything, you couldn't have logged in, and you get thousands of these all the time from people on cell phones trying to go to your website and they lose their connection before they finish making a connection. If you were to log incomplete handshakes, you'd just get a big log of junk. So it's likely that you can do this and you really won't be detected at the other end. That's why it's the default scan. So there's the SYN scan. If you send a SYN and the port is closed, the operating system replies to a closed port with a reset saying, I've received your request is denied, I'm not serving data on that port, so quit trying. If it's open, you'll get a SYN ACK. If it's filtered, that means a firewall blocked the packet before it got to the server. So the server never got the packet at all, and you'll just get no answer. Filtered ports are hard to detect, and they slow down your scan because you don't get an answer. So all you can do is wait for some period of time, like 2 or 10 or 30 seconds, and then you don't know. It's either filtered or that packet got lost, because packets do get lost, as we know, especially on wireless networks, but on wired networks too, if a packet might have just not gotten there. So now you have to try again and wait again, and probably try again and wait again before you're really convinced that that port is filtered. So filtered scans are slower to pick up. Yeah?
Is there a way that you can change the setting of the server to log this?
Yes, you can log anything. You can even log complete network traffic. And we did that in the network monitoring class, but you could just use Wireshark for short range. And for long range, you use TCP dump or other tools. You can record all the traffic if you want to on your server. The problem is, when you're done, you have a huge log, and it's hard to decide, hard to read through. So what you do, very few people like to do that. They do that only for emergencies. I mean, they'll log the entire packet and save it, but they only look at that if they have to. What they mostly look at is higher level data like log entries on the established connections and such to detect attacks. If you then decide that there's a certain period of time of interest, then you look at that. It's like those video cameras, they're recording something, that's really boring to look at. So you somehow try to zero in on the time of interest and then review that for the time of interest. If you record all the traffic on your network, it's something like 40 terabytes to record a month of traffic on a 100 megabit per second network. So a lot of people do, but they typically only go a few weeks in the past, and they rotate it. Yeah?
Is that how Splunk works?
Splunk, no, what Splunk does, Splunk will take inputs, not complete packet captures at all. You feed Splunk logs from intrusion detection systems and your web server and such. You can feed it as much data as you want, but you typically don't give it full packets. You give it summary data. And Splunk searches through that like Google. That's why Splunk is not intended to analyze full packet captures, Wireshark is. But what Splunk is intended to do is quickly look through a vast amount of data, like all the things that have happened in your corporate network for a month, and quickly find the bad stuff. So there are queries, this indicates a SQL injection, this indicates a denial of service attack, and so on. You run these canned queries and you find them. And then when you want to get right down to the bottom and see exactly what happened, then you might look at the complete package in something like Wireshark to figure out what happened. But you couldn't look at all the data on a network for a day in Wireshark. It's just way too big. As you've done the projects here, even looking at like one nmap scan in Wireshark is a lot of work. So just imagine, 10,000 people view your website in an hour. You're going to look at all that in Wireshark. You're getting anywhere at that rate. You need a higher level, more vague summary, this many connections per hour, to look at the landscape and then pick the point of interest to drill down in. And that's what all these SIEM systems do. They try to make it easy to summarize a whole network's activity and somehow make it easy for you to spot the suspicious parts to look in more closely at. So a connect scan is an option where you just make the complete connection. It's the same as a SYN scan unless it's open. If it is open, it does complete the handshake and then send a reset. This, some people think it might be more accurate. It's a little bit slower. No particular benefit really, but it is an option. You can then send non-standard packets. The SYN and ACK and reset are just single bits that are either 0 or 1. You can send a packet that has none of those bits set. This is called a null packet, and it has no value. But you can technically create it, and the IP will deliver it because the IP layer doesn't look at the TCP layer. When it arrives, it's not a SYN, not an ACK, not a reset, so it has no purpose. But because the request for comments that define the protocols on the internet say that if you receive a null packet or any other invalid packet, you should respond with a reset. So operating systems that obey the law, obey the rules, not the law, obey the rules, like Linux, will respond with a reset. Windows will not, typically. Windows will do something random because Microsoft doesn't really care about your stinking RFCs written by some academic. All they care about is doing real business and making money. So any kind of packet that is not related to a real transaction, they don't care what you do, and different versions of their operating system do different things. Xmas scan is another one with bin, push, and urgent all set. Just a sort of meaningless bunch of flags turned on like a null scan. A Linux system with an open port will give you, or a closed port will give you a reset packet. Microsoft Windows will just do random things. Windows 2000 will show all ports closed. Windows XP will show all ports open because Microsoft doesn't really pay any attention to how you handle invalid packets. They don't care. And they don't bother to be consistent or anything because they're trying to make money here. And they don't really care about obeying every letter of the rules. They only obey the rules that have to do with actually getting the job done, like any other business. All right, pings are the original way you'd find things. You'd send ICMP echo requests and you get ICMP echo replies. This is what people typically did as their first step in everyone answered pings. And the purpose of them was to help detect network problems. The problem is this became so popular that Microsoft decided for a security measure to stop answering pings. So Microsoft decided for a security measure to stop answering pings. So ever since Windows XP Service Pack 2, Microsoft machines have a firewall on them and no longer answer pings by default. So if you do a ping scan of a modern network, you only find the MACs. All right, you can send an ACK scan where you send ACK packets. If you have an old firewall on the network which does not have a memory, then when you have a TCP connection, you send a SYN ACK. Then you do something like a file download. So it sends you some packets, and after you get enough data, typically 8,000 bytes, you send an ACK. So it sends you some more data, you send another ACK. So if data is going one way, there's a chain of ACKs going the other way. So if I send an ACK out of the blue, a firewall does not know that that is not part of an exchange in progress. So it will let it through. It has to let the ACKs through, unless the firewall is smart enough to remember whether there was actually a TCP handshake before this and there really is a download in progress. And old firewalls were not able to do that. So ACKs would just go through on any port anytime. And so you can sometimes send an ACK through past a firewall when other packets would be blocked. So that gives you, that sounds pretty good. The problem is there's almost no response to an ACK. So even if you do get an ACK past a firewall, you can't tell that's happened. So the only thing you can really do is send that ACK with a low TTL. TTL determines how many hops before a packet gets thrown away. So if you want to scan past a firewall, I think I did this to the NSA once and it worked. What you do, let me try one of these. I don't think the NSA will still fall for this, but if I get a command prompt, okay, now if I do, let's start with traceroute. Let's ping. Let's try Google, 8.8.8.8. That's one of Google's servers. Okay, so I pinged that server. This server actually answers pings. It's a Linux server, and Google's not hiding. Now, if I do a traceroute to there, this sends packets with a controlled TTL. So it sends packets out with a TTL of 1, and they make one hop towards it, and so they hit a City College gateway, 147, 144, 2081. And it only takes 2 milliseconds to get there because that's on the local network here. And it did it 3 times. Now it hit hop 2 and hop 3. Now the City College gateway might be blocking all this these days. They didn't used to, but they might be now. So I'll let that go and we'll come back to it, but it might not be very interesting. But anyway, if I find that the Google server is 10 hops away, I could, and I find a firewall 8 hops away that's blocking some traffic, I could send packets with a TTL of 9. So they will go 1 past the firewall and then expire. And sometimes the ICMP notice of expiration is allowed out. And so I can probe past a firewall 1 or 2 hops this way. It's not enormously useful, but it is a kind of cute trick and it shows that you understand TCP. All right, another thing you might do is scan UDP. Remember, UDP is the simpler protocol with no handshake. Now, until a few years ago, I think 2010, everybody thought UDP was useless because it doesn't answer any packets you send it, so you can't tell what's going on, so that's no use. Now, the problem is UDP services are actually nice and juicy. Some of them are quite valuable, some of them are quite old and insecure, like NTP. It would be pretty nice to find them and exploit them. And so in 2010, somebody finally figured out, well, we should have thought of decades earlier, you can do a UDP scan. You don't send a random packet. You send an expected request. You send a correctly formatted DNS request to UDP 53, and you send a correctly formatted NTP request to UDP 123. And if it's running the expected service on the expected port, it will reply. So you can do a UDP scan. It is more complicated and less accurate than a TCP scan, but it's not of 0 value. And so UDP scans are now a little bit more useful than they used to be. So nmap is what you mostly use for port scanning. If you have a vulnerability assessment tool like Nessus or OpenVAS, it will do a port scan and then much more. It will then try a whole bunch of CVE numbers, see if you have this bone and that bone and this bone, and take hours doing that, but it'll start with a port scan. All these things do that first. So nmap was written in Frac Magazine. Frac Magazine is still out there. Boy, if you want to be intimidated, read Frac. I still don't think I understand more than 1 article in 10 in Frac. It is really, really dense and technical. If you want a friendly magazine, get 2600. 2600 is about at the level of this class. Anybody that knows the basics of security can pretty much understand what's going on. Frac is the opposite. It is for the hardcore binary nerds that can totally get at everything. And typically, I can't even understand the titles. I haven't looked at it in a few years. I might be a little better at it now, but anyway, that's where a lot of good stuff started, including nmap. Nmap is so famous, it's in a lot of movies. It was in The Matrix. It's in a lot of other movies. They really use it. They use it correctly, by the way, too. There's a time back in the days of war games when you could just do something ridiculous and nobody would know because hacking was so rare. Now there's so many hackers that people sneer at you if you have bad hacking scenes in movies. So places like Mr. Robot and The Matrix actually pay a real hacker to be a consultant so that they don't look like idiots demonstrating hacking. So I got some cahoots about that stuff. Good, and we're on track here. Let's go here. Here, I guess I've got the online people connected. Good. And here's my cahoots. And I should be able to search for 123 and find a chapter 5A somewhere. Yeah. Good. They're paying consultants to improve lockpicking in movies and TV also. That's one of the things Skylar Towns does. I still see a lot of TV shows where they just stick like a nail in a lock and then pretend they're picking it, but more and more of them actually pay a consultant to make it more realistic. All right, might have enough people. Let's see if this lasts for 10 seconds. Apparently so. Okay. So what free tool will let you log into Windows without the password? Or the UBCD does it, KonBoot does it, but it's not free. All right, what free tool will find hosts most quickly? Okay, NetDiscover is ArtScan. It's much faster than nmap. If a firewall is blocking access, what will nmap report? Okay, that's what they call filtered. The packet never got there. All right, you send a SYN to a closed port. What do you get back? You get a reset. You don't just ignore anything. You get a reset so they know you've asked, you got your answer. Your answer is no. All right. And I think there's another one. Yeah, you send a null packet to a closed port on Linux. What do you get? Okay, you'll get a reset because the rules say answer, always give an answer. Give a reset if you can't give another answer. and Linux obeys the rules. All right, I'm going to make a note of the winners. Aha, and this reminds me, Patrick, Bennis, and Anon. Somebody has won a few times, and their name is Bob. And I thought Bob was a real name, but as far as I can tell, there is nobody named Bob. So if Bob wants your points, you're going to have to tell me your real name. So be aware of that. There's a few Kahoot wins blowing in the breeze right now. Anyways, not to the hour yet. I think we can go ahead a bit. So Nessus was a free vulnerability scanner, and then it became pay, and it went through several generations. Now there's a pretty easy to obtain commercial academic license to do quite a lot for free, but it's technically a pay tool. This is a full-featured vulnerability scanner that will spend hours scanning every port and sending many exotic attacks and trying to test to find a whole series of vulnerabilities. It has had many different appearances. I think this is a fairly modern one. So it will check your databases and find various vulnerabilities and so on. It'll give you a long list of vulnerabilities it finds. It'll give you links to click on, CVE numbers, informative articles, you know, because once you run a vuln scanner, it says you've got 20 vulns. You now have to spend hours researching those 20 vulns to decide what they are. Then you have to go manually verify them because vuln scanners are not very accurate. And then you have to decide, given the context of the business, does it really matter? That's why they pay you as a pen tester, to give them that human judgment of, all right, I know you ran some complicated tool that gave you some complicated 100-page report. What does it mean? Tell me, what do I have to do? You know, what are the top 10, the top 3, what are the consequences of ignoring them for another year? That's what they want to hear. They want to make a business decision. How much money should I spend this year fixing this junk, or can I get away with ignoring it? And you have to help them make that decision. And one of the things almost all amateur security people do is they yell and scream, and they want attention, and they want everything they find to be fixed. And after you work on the other side for a while, you'll get over that. You'll realize there are always a ton of problems everywhere. You can't fix them all. It is not reasonable to fix things just because you were clever enough to find them. You have to figure out which ones actually are costing you money and fix them, and not bother with the others. All right, so OpenVAS is the open source fork of Nessus that has some cute graphics and does a similar job. It'll give you a list of vulnerabilities, and the vuln scanners will always rate them with a color code like red, green, or yellow, but you can't trust that very much. Like I say, they have a very myopic view of how important something is. Yeah?
So Nessus is a server technology. So when it just does an attack, is it done by the server or the client?
Well, I'm not sure Nessus is still separated into a server and client. At one time, you had to install a server and a client, and then they changed it into an integrated component, and I'm not quite sure where it is now. They change it pretty often. But you can run it on a server or a client. But generally, you do these assessments on servers. You could, I suppose, do an Nessus scan of a client, but typically you scan a server because that's your main, the main thing you're trying to secure. All right, so you'll get a list of things here like Fedora updates and so on. You can run it on any system, Linux, Windows, Mac, anything, and it will do it. It will run through a huge list. It has a huge database of vulnerabilities, and it has some kind of way to detect each vulnerability, and it makes some attempt to find it. None of it is perfect. The vulnerability list doesn't include everything, and the detection scripts do not always detect it correctly. You have to be aware, take it with a grain of salt. Now, you can do a lot of ping sweeps if you want to find things, pinging a lot of IP addresses, but machines that are turned off won't answer, machines with Windows Firewall won't answer, machines with other firewalls that are chosen to block pings will not answer. You really aren't going to find everything with ping. There are tools out there that will let you ping more hosts faster and vary the contents of the ping and so on, like fping and hping. In your textbook, they say everyone should learn these. They're important for security testers. I changed my mind about that because of Python. It is so easy to write your own tools in Python. It's very practical. You do not need to settle for somebody else's list of 25 options. And that's what you'll be doing in this class. I learned that from Microsoft. I sent Microsoft a vulnerability report years ago, and they replied. They said, in the first place, we already know about that, and we don't care. We're not going to fix it. And in the second place, you should have written that in Scapy. That would be cool. And I said, oh yeah. So I checked out Scapy, and Scapy is cool. So I mean, I was really pleased. I mean, there's a time when Microsoft would just ignore you or lie to you. Now, if you have a security problem at Microsoft, they're beyond the denial stage. They will quickly tell you, okay, we have a security team, here's how you reach them, and they will really answer you within a couple of days. You know, they're not messing around anymore. Most other people like IOTA are still in the denial stage. Oh no, we have no security problems, just shut up. Well, that's unpleasant to deal with. But Microsoft has gotten over it. Yeah, they're another vulnerable report. We get thousands of them, and a bunch of them are true, and we actually have to fix some of them, so we can't pretend that we can ignore that. So they went through their denial and lying about it 10 or 20 years ago. Apple went through theirs about 8 years ago. Every company, it's sort of a stage of maturity when you finally admit, no, we're no smarter than everybody else out there. Our stuff has problems. We actually ought to listen to some of these vulnerable reports. All right, HPing is another one of those command line tools that can do simple forms of packet crafting, they call it. But the really boss for packet crafting is Scapy, which you'll use in the projects. Now, another issue is a broadcast address. You can, originally, you were allowed to send packets to every machine on a network. This was supposed to be the easy way to scan ports. And this is how, in MS-DOS-based networks, back in the really old days, like the 80s, every machine would just send a broadcast every 10 seconds. Hi, I'm the printer. In case you want to print, I'm a printer. I'm still here. You guys want to print something? Every single machine would broadcast every 10 seconds. And this was actually pretty cool. You never had to hunt for anything. Everything was broadcasting its intention. Unfortunately, that was intended for like machines with maybe 5 things on it. As networks grew, that was ridiculous, and they had to get rid of all that. But that's why they had broadcast packets. So let's send a couple of these on the City College network. So here's the City College network. Yeah, as I thought, I don't really, Google is 9 hops away, but I don't get to see any of the hops in the middle because I think something's being filtered around here. Anyway, let's do ifconfig en0. Okay, here's my IP address on the City College network. We have a public class B address range of 147, 144, and everybody on the network gets some random numbers out here. So I'm 209.110. Then we have a network mask, which is here in hexadecimal. So this is 255, 255, 240, 0, if you turn it back into decimal. And here's the broadcast address. So I can ping to that broadcast address. And if I do, I get only one answer, which is from me, because we have isolation turned on now at the college, the way they do at Starbucks and the way they don't at the San Francisco airport. If you set up a typical wireless access point and you don't turn on the isolation mode, then everybody can talk to each other. And City College now wants to protect students from each other. So if one of the students around here is allowed to open file share and they're sharing their pictures, you can't connect through the City College wireless into their shared folder and get it because you're blocked. Same thing's true at Starbucks. Every one of you is on your own VLAN. So even though you're all sharing the same network, you cannot directly address anybody else. It's just blocked. It shows up as administratively blocked. Now, until recently, I could do this, though. I don't know if it's going to work now. Yeah, it's not really working. Okay, that used to give me like thousands of answers. I'd get all the Macs on campus. But that seems to be blocked, too. Now I own only 2 devices. This is the undirected broadcast. 255, 255, 255, 255 is the address that is all ones in binary, and that gives me every device on my local area network. But since City College has isolation mode turned on, my network contains only 2 devices, me and the router. That's it. And everybody else will get the same result. Yeah. It'll be in the settings of your switch. We're using Meraki, so ours is controlled on the web. It'll be in your wireless access point. And cheap ones might not have this option. But any small to medium business and higher, they all have it, and you can turn it on. And Starbucks has it. Starbucks, by the way, also messes with DNS a lot. If you do advanced projects at Starbucks, you find their network is fouling with you because, of course, they just want to keep it up and they won't let people do normal surfing, and they're not worried about messing with the traffic for anything weird. And City College blocks a lot on our wireless network, too. That's why I just got a danger zone put in this room so we can have unfiltered internet for the contests. There's a special wireless network set up when we're doing contests in here. We have one up in the hacking lab, too, so we can bypass all the filtering if we have to. And that's how we do things like run honeypots. That's how Kirk ran his proxy that anybody could use, and then people attack it. And that's why they don't want everybody just doing that casually. But if you actually want to run something public and watch it get attacked, You need straight unfiltered internet to do that. And you can do that at home. That's why you'll find a DMZ setting in like your Comcast router. You can connect one device straight to the internet with no filtering, but it's not what most people want. You only want it for a special purpose. The most common reason is because you're playing some kind of game that's being filtered, and you don't want that. Anyway, so you can ping a broadcast address, and if you're on an unfiltered network, which we are not anymore, then if I ping a broadcast address, one ping will give you hundreds of responses. All the machines out there answer. So this was the first packet amplification attack. You not only could you ping broadcast addresses until recently, you could also ping the undirected broadcast address, 147, 144, 255, 255. So even if you're not on campus, you could send a packet that would be forwarded over the internet, get to campus, and then do a broadcast locally. So from off campus, you could send one ping and get 1,000 answers. And that makes your attack more powerful. So all you do, another fun thing about ping is it's not TCP. It's running with no handshake. So you can falsify the from address. So what you do is if I want to take down Google, I send pings to a company, to a broadcast address, and I put Google in as the from address. So I send one packet and they get 1,000 replies over there. This not only amplifies my bandwidth, so it does more harm, it also conceals me. They're going to say, why is City College attacking me? My address is not on any of the packets that go there. So these things are useful for anonymization and packet amplification. And the Smurf attack was why they blocked directed broadcasts. They're no longer filtered by the internet. They're no longer forwarded by internet routers. You can't ping a broadcast address from off campus anymore for this reason. And this is what broadcast ping used to look like at City College. I could ping the local broadcast and I'd get an answer from all the Macs that are turned on. Not the PCs, because they ignore pings, but all the Macs. And on a busy day, it'd be dozens of people answering me. All right. Let me just plan my future here. We're 10:51. Let me see how far down here we are. Oh, good. We're doing pretty well. All right. I'll just carry on. All right. So you can craft your own packets with a variety of tools. And the simplest thing is just write a script that does it. And the easiest way to do it is Python. You can script in Bash or in a variety of languages. Bash scripting is the same as old MS-DOS batch scripting. You just take commands that you would have typed at the kernel and just put them in a text file. It plays them like a player piano. That's one simple way. So here's a simple script that will have a while loop counting up to 253, and then it will print something here, which just make a list of IP addresses, counting up through the numbers. That's one kind of script you can make. Scapy is what we're mainly going to use, and as you see, there's a lot of projects here where you use Scapy to construct packets. You'll be doing a handshake and various kinds of scans. It only takes a few commands. This is all it takes to connect over UDP. You create an IP object with I equals IP. You specify the destination IP address. Then you create a UDP object with U equals UDP. So this is layer 3, and that's layer 4. You specify the destination port, and now you can send. At I/U is layer 3, layer 4, and at layer 7, you put hello world. And if somebody's listening on that port, they get hello world. You can make a little instant messenger with about 6 lines of code, and therefore you can send any kind of packet you want. You don't need to use HPing and FPing. You can build any packet byte by byte to be anything you want. You can take packets straight from Wireshark, copy the binary, put them in Scapy, and make them. I was at DEF CON, coming home from the last DEF CON, in the airport waiting for my flight, and I saw online that they had a new attack called SMB Loris. And in like half an hour, I was able to make it run and make a video, make it work, with no more than like the slides of the presenter, because it is really easy to make any packet you want. So simple attacks, you do not need to be a super programmer to make them with Scapy. You'll be doing a lot of it in the projects. You can write your own tools at Python, and in 124, we go through quite a lot of projects from Violet Python, which is just a fun book where you make attacks in Python, and you make lousy Python. Real professional programming is a lot of work, and it's kind of tedious work. You have to think of every problem and write a lot of error messages and handling it. But if you're an attacker, you don't care. Your tool can crash. It only has to work once. It doesn't have to handle any complicated situations. You just write the fun part and break something, and then you run away giggling. You don't have to bother doing all the tedious work of making a tool that will really work on 1,000 machines and have helpful messages for tech support and all that jazz. So that's what we do in 124. All right, and the thing I wanted to show you, which the other thing I wanted to show you is the new project is quantum computing. I was very pleased a month or two ago to discover IBM is pushing their quantum computers a lot. And they have made a quantum computer available in the cloud for free to everybody. So you can start doing quantum computing, which is pretty bloody awesome. And so you might as well get used to it because quantum computing is weird. Quantum computing is not at all like other kinds of computing. Now, this quantum computer, of course, doesn't yet do anything earth-shaking because there is no computer yet that can do stuff like break modern RSA encryption. In order to do that, they have to get up to about 80 qubits. And for free, we get to use 5 qubits. Now, 5 qubits is not enough to do anything you couldn't do on a normal computer, but it is enough to see how these computers work. So you just go to IBM's Q Experience and start experimenting with a quantum computer. And there are 2 options. There is a real quantum computer running here. This thing is cooled to 0.021 Kelvin, 21 milli-degrees above absolute zero. So this thing cost them a lot of money to make and maintain, and it has 5 qubits, and there they are. 5 little magnets are in there connected to each other in this pattern, entangled by the magic of quantum mechanics. And you can use it to a certain extent, but what you can do is simulate stuff for free, which you could also do by downloading scripts, but you have only so many credits you get to do it. So I haven't done any real quantum computing. I'm content to do simulation. So in the world of quantum mechanics, qubits start out in a state. These qubits are all these are my 5 qubits. They're starting out in the state of 0, which is not an uncertain state. They're 100% in state 0. Now I can measure them. This is the measurement tool. So I could measure that quantum. Now, in quantum mechanics, if your qubits are in an uncertain state, they sort of phase in and out from one state to another. And then when you measure them, they collapse into one certain state. And after that, they're no longer quantum mechanical. Now they're classical. So that's a measurement. So if I run that, simulate. I'm going to simulate that. It's going to give me a name. And what it does is run it 100 times and then tell you what the answer are. And the answer is 100% of the time, the bits are all 0 because they were all 0 and all I did was measure them. I didn't change anything. So this is actually not using any of the quantum properties. I started them in a certain state and I measured it, and of course it was in a certain state called 0. So that's not very exciting, but that's the first step. So the next thing that would be more fun is to not measure it yet, but instead do something before that. And I think the H gate is kind of fun. The H gate, I think, flips it. Let's see what that one does. Simulate. And the H gate flips it through 90 degrees. So now it is half 1 and half 0. It is one of those uncertain states. So when you measure it, it has a chance of having a 1 here and a chance of having a 0 there, and you don't get exactly 0.5 because this is a real experiment. It ran it 100 times, and 46 times it was here and 54 it was there. If you run it again, you'll get a different mix because it doesn't do enough to make the statistics certain. It just measures them 100 times by default. So now you can make other things. Down here, you can entangle 2 chips. And this is where you program a quantum computer, which I think is wonderful, by just dragging little things on here like music score. There's also a language that looks like Python you can see, but I wouldn't bother with that. This is more fun. So here is 3 bits in a superposition state. 3 H's will do it. Let's start with that one, and then I'll do one more. I can do this for 3 of them, so I can put an H here and an H here, and I can measure this one and measure that one. Okay, now 3 of them are put in an uncertain state, and then I measure 3 of them, so now I have 8 possibilities, all equally likely. 111, 110, 001, and so on. This is like flipping 3 coins. Each one of them has a 50% chance of being 1 or 0, so I get 1/8 chance of each plus noise. Since I only did it 100 times, it's not perfectly flat. So that's fine. Now the next thing is the quantum entanglement. That is where you really get to the goodies here. So to make quantum entanglement, I need to use an H in the middle, and then, there we are, the plus and the X to entangle those chips, those 2 qubits. So it's the H in the middle. Get rid of this one. There it is. Okay, get rid of this one. Okay, move these over. don't think it really matters what order they're in, but anyway, I want the H, then I want the plus and the X up top, I think. Let me see if I can do this. I might have to play a little. Yep, the plus there. And then I put an X up there. There. Now these two are entangled together. So even though they are uncertain, they're connected. And that's what really makes quantum computing powerful. And now if I simulate that one, now there are only two states possible. This one here is always 0 because these bits here have never been changed. This bit can be 0 or 1, and this one can be 0 or 1, but they're always opposite. The only two choices are 0, 1, and 1, 0. You cannot have 0, 0 or 1, 1 because I entangled them. Those two so-called uncertain states are tied together, so they move uncertainly together. And that's the main feature of quantum mechanics that you do not get in classical mechanics that makes it possible to do these amazing calculations. You can connect things together that have not yet been determined. And so the next, I have to challenge, we figure out how to entangle 4 qubits. I was not able to entangle all 5 qubits, which is because even though mathematically that is an option, in fact, with this hardware, not everything is possible. There are only so many actual electronic connections between one and the next. So on this device, I was not able to entangle all 5 bits, but I was able to entangle 4 of them. So I can go from 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 to 1, 0, 1, 1, 1. So these 4 move together, and there's that's as close as I could get. So play with that thing. It's good for you. And that's the world of quantum mechanics, which is coming very fast. I think IBM is now up to like 30 qubits, and they have a device they're driving around and showing off at the trade shows. So when they get up to, see, there are 2 problems with this. Qubits are not all the same. To really do a good job, you not only have to have a bunch of qubits, but you have to have them very precise so they don't make mistakes. And the current generation of quantum mechanics don't have of quantum computers, they don't have any qubits and they're not very accurate. So you really can't get too far in it. If they were able to get up to like 80 qubits and have them very precise, they could start breaking cryptography. And it would change the world. And that's what everyone expects in 10 or 20 years. So right now, there's just prototypes like this where you can begin to understand the concepts. And there's a very nice tutorial there if you haven't studied any quantum mechanics that shows you a nice 3-dimensional graph of how you can understand this in terms of like an arrow pointing in 3 dimensions. Anyway, I think I'll do the last Kahoots because that'll finish this lecture. And then I can, I'll go up to the lab to help anybody who wants to work on projects. And I don't think there's any Hackers Club at noon. So they'll just, I'll go up to the lab and then I'll be back down here at 1 for the 127 class. The lab will be open until 4, but there won't be any more 123 happening here. So I want to go to my Kahoots, this one here, there we are, 4B, okay. All right. By the way, you people will have to tell me who you are. I got Patrick, that might be a real name, and Benish. Anon is certainly not a real name, so anyway. 123, Kahoots, 224, 18. All right. Patrick and Benish, I might be able to figure out who that is, but not Anon. All right, I'll wait another 10 seconds and see if this number quits growing. Apparently so. Okay. So, wait, this is 4. This is the wrong Kahoots. Never mind. Let's try finding the right Kahoots, which would be this one. Okay, that's last week's Kahoot. That's no fun. All right. Okay. Holy cow, you people are pretty fast. I'll wait 10 seconds. Okay. Let's see how this looks. Port scanning, that sounds more right. All right, which one is a port scanner, not a Bowne scanner? Yeah, it's nmap, although to be fair, nmap now has a bunch of scripts and people keep adding more like Wireshark, so it's closer and closer to being a real Bowne scanner, but it's by no means as comprehensive as something like Nessus. All right, which one is a Python library? Okay, that's Scapy. All right, which tool is a commercial Bowne scanner? Okay, that's Nessus. All right, which tool will give you the most flexibility to craft packets? Scapy, you can just build your packet bit by bit to be anything you want. Okay, so I got Eli, and AK, and Connor. Okay, so if I have Bob or Anon, you should tell me who you are. These other people, I think I can track them down. Aha, here's some chat messages. Perhaps people are telling me who they are. Ah, Connor, okay, Connor, I figured that's actually close to real name. And Bennis, yeah, okay, good. I got Bennis's name. I still don't know who Anon is. They are not going to get their points unless they come out of the closet. Anyway, okay. Well, I'm going to stop the share. I'll clean up and go up to the lab. I'll be back down here at 1.